Hey folks, Dr. Mike Israetel here for Renaissance Periodization. Some of you would think I would get tired of saying that, and in fact, you're correct. I gotta get a new video intro. Maybe we could have like cool graphics, a dinosaur eating a shark. The shark has a bomb in its mouth though, so that'd be sweet. In any case, not as sweet, but still cool. Let's talk about how to use your pump. That's right, the pump, Arnold. The pump is like coming, that whole thing. Using your muscle pump to partially inform you about how to regulate your training volume. Essentially, how pumped up are you? What does that mean for how many sets of an exercise or a muscle group should you do next session, next week, so on and so forth. This is only for hypertrophy training, not for strength training. So when you comment, for sure comment for the algorithm. If you're like, what about strength training? I don't know. JK, we can do this for strength training, but the pump is not very relevant for strength training. So there's your quick answer. 3 things we're going to talk about. First, what is the pump specifically at a physiological level, but why do we care? Second, how to use the pump as a partial tool. And lastly, how to take that pump as a tool and apply it to hypertrophy training to autoregulate volume specifically. So here we go. What is the pump? Why do we care? The pump is the swelling of the muscle cell itself and the swelling of the whole area with fluid added to all of the space that's not just the cell itself, the extracellular space, so on and so forth. So swelling of the muscle cell and all of the structures, or most of the structures around it. People used to say, like, oh, I'm just putting some blood into the muscle. The pump is not just blood. It's a bunch of different kinds of fluid, including blood. If you have a lot of blood going through a muscle, you can get that going just by moving your shit up and down. If you want to, let's say, get a lot of blood moving through your quads, just go take a walk or jog. You don't get pumped from walking or jogging, I sure hope. If you do, go see a cardiologist. But if you are just moving around, not training hard, not taking things close to failure, then you get a crap load of blood running through that muscle. It doesn't cause a pump. A pump is a little bit more complicated than that. A pump occurs when blood and fluids go into the muscle at a certain rate, but they leave at a much slower rate, so you get this swelling effect. Now look, if your calves start to swell up like crazy when you're walking, you'd be at least a little bit concerned. However, if they didn't swell up like crazy when you were training them for size, you may also be a little bit, maybe not concerned, but be like, God damn it, this training's not going well. And that's a preview of something we're going to conclude based on the pump in just a little bit. So the pump is indicating that a disruptive event has occurred in the muscle cells, probably because lots of tension has been generated. Like if you want bigger pumps, go heavy. Like if someone hands you a 5-pound dumbbell to curl and they're like, all right, get a pump. You're like, fuck, what? But if they hand you 25, you're like, all right, pump city, here we go. Lots of metabolite summation, especially metabolite summation. The pump and the burn are incredibly well correlated. That is, sets that cause a profound burn and should generate a shitload of tension and take you close to failure. Those are all direct hypertrophy signals, by the way. They tend to cause the best pumps, all right? It would be really tough to get your best pump ever without feeling the burn in the last couple of reps. So metabolite summation literally, and there's chemical mechanisms for when you generate a ton of metabolites in the area of the muscle, a ton more fluid flows in to essentially dilute them, and that's part of the way you get a pump. Not the only way, but part of the way. So when you have a big pump, you're probably generating a lot of metabolites, which we'll get to in a bit, is probably a good thing for hypertrophy. And lastly, a pump also occurs because damage has been initiated, right? In a similar way that when you hurt something, it swells up. To a smaller extent, this happens when you're physically hurting and damaging and ripping the muscles when you're training. So a lot of that pump actually is from the damage secondary to the damage itself. So when you're getting a pump, there is a decent possibility that more growth has been stimulated and caused, right? First of all, the pump has been investigated directly, cell swelling itself. If you swell a muscle cell, hypertrophy starts to elevate. So cell swelling itself, the literal pump itself, causes muscle growth. Probably just a little bit of growth, though not a ton. However, indirectly, we know we get the biggest pumps when we have high tension that gets you close to failure, which means high tension in the fastest motor units, which are most growth responsive. A ton of metabolites being generated really close to the burn, like, oh my God, my fucking quads. And possibly some damage as well, which occurs from tons of tension and metabolites over multiple sets. That nasty level of disruption causes hypertrophy. Damage probably doesn't cause hypertrophy itself, or maybe just a little, but sure as hell, tension and metabolites do, and they also cause damage. So when you have a gnarly pump, you can be pretty sure that there's lots of tension and metabolites going on, and that you took the sets appropriately close to failure. And for a decent enough volume, that's a good enough level of disruption that actually causes growth. So not only does the pump cause growth directly, when you have a big pump, all the things, tension, metabolite burn, and proximity to failure, and so on and so forth, are probably also there in large factor. And when that's the case, you're probably getting a lot of hypertrophy. Now, the pump is only a partial tool. We'll have future videos to talk about different other tools that in the session, in the moment itself, or a few days later can tell us if we did a good job stimulating hypertrophy. The pump is just one of them. It's a partial tool. It's not perfect. A pump, having a good pump cannot guarantee you that you're growing muscle. And the corollary is also false. So not getting a good pump doesn't guarantee you didn't cause a lot of really good muscle growth. However, the pump does have some utility, right? But it should be used with other factors, which we'll talk about later, like disruption, how much damage you retain, so on and so forth. Performance is a big one, but it can be an important indicator that we don't just want to ignore completely. And here's how we use it. Before you use a pump to adjust your volume, you got to understand that your technique has to be really good and your RIR has to be accurate, which is to say, your technique has to be locked in place to be stimulating the muscles you want. Let's say the chest, or your fly technique has to be good. And you've got to be going hard. That's a high quality set, is a set with good technique, and every set is taken close to failure. If you're not doing that shit, don't worry about your pump, because it might not tell you anything at all. If you're training hard and with good technique, then you can use the pump to auto-regulate volume in future sessions and future weeks. And here's how you do it. If you do a muscle group, let's just keep it super simple and say with one exercise. You're doing leg press and you're training your quads. Let's say if you barely get a pump or no pump at all, what is the chance that that is causing the most high degree of growth for that session? Man, it's just not that high, because apparently the tension wasn't super high, or there wasn't enough represented. There's barely any metabolites. There's barely any disruption. There's barely any direct pump. Where the hell are you going to get growth from? Can you imagine doing a super hard leg press workout, getting no pump and being like, fuck yeah, going to get jacked? Seems unlikely, right? So if there's barely any pump or no pump at all, you can probably add a set at least to that session next week. So let's say with 2 sets of leg press, you're like, man, I don't really have a big pump. It's probably okay next week to add 3, because it'll probably give you a better pump, probably be more tension, et cetera, and all that stuff that causes growth, leading to more growth. If you have a pretty good pump in a session, but it's not like a world-altering pump, it's not the best pump ever, then you can just repeat that same amount of sets next week, and increasing the load and reps will make it a little harder, which is good. Or you can add a set next week, but no more, okay? And this is a big mistake people make all the time. They get a pretty decent pump and like, fuck, that was sweet, 4 sets, decent pump. And next week they're like, fucking 7. Like, what the fuck, 7? 4 was already really good. Maybe 5, maybe still 4. But don't go 6, 7, 8, some crazy shit, because that'll almost certainly be too much. Another way to look at it is, look, if 4 did a pretty decent job, why are you trying to do double that amount or 1.5 times that amount? What do you think you're getting out of it? Super decent job? It doesn't work like that. Pretty soon you're damaging so much that you might not be growing a ton. And we'll get to that in just a second, more detail. If the pump is very good or amazing, if you do, let's say 4 sets of like leg press, we'll just keep the example to one thing, keep it simple, and you fucking get off the leg press, and you're like, fuck, my quads, this is fucking sweet. You could barely bend them. You're like, dude, gnarly pump. Man, there's just no reason to change the shit next week. Your load is going up anyway, or your reps are going up anyway, just like normal progress. Just keep it at 4. If next week, 4 sets you do again, and the pump's like meh, then you can go to 5 the week after. But if you've got a good thing, don't fuck it up. Lastly, if you have an earth-shattering pump, like the pump where you're like, dude, I think my pecs are fucking just can't move anymore. It's like your skin feels like it's like breaking. If you get that kind of pump, you might actually be doing so much work and so close to failure and so many metabolites and everything else that you're generating an unsustainable amount of damage, possibly, right? You can be ready to repeat that session next week. So a little bit more load, a little bit more reps, but the same number of sets. Let's say 6 sets in the leg press just fucking blew you up. Yeah, maybe you do 6 sets next week, but be prepared. Pumps like that often cause a crazy amount of soreness, and you might have to do a lighter session or modify your next leg workout because it was just too much. And then the next week when it comes time to leg press again, because you probably train legs like 2 or 3 times a week, The next week, you're like, man, last time 6 sets got me a crazy pump, way too much soreness. I couldn't recover on time. Maybe it's a good idea to do 5. You go back to 5, you still get a sweet pump, not exactly the perfect pump, an awesome pump, but then you don't get super sore or just get sore for a couple days, heal next on time for the next workout, and everything's super groovy, right? So point D here on your PowerPoint slides that you see, earth-shattering pumps are probably stimulating as much hypertrophy as you're able to do at any one time. But because they cause so much damage, they're not sustainable. So people say, like, how do you know when it's time to leave the gym? And a lot of people be like, I fucking train until my pump just fucking annihilates me. Like, that's a good time to train once, good way to train one time. But generally speaking, you know, you kind of want to back off a little bit and just get really good solid pumps that do 2 things. 1, grow plenty of muscle, and also allow you to recover enough to get more solid pumps, more solid pumps, more solid pumps. The alternative is to get crazy psycho pump, get so much damage you need to fuck up your next training session, and then you keep going like this, and half your training sessions are no good because they're just recovery sessions. That you probably don't want to do. So this is a good way to use the pump to auto-regulate volume. There will be other variables introduced in future videos. This isn't the only one. But this is kind of a partially informative way to shit test if you're doing enough volume or not. And the extremes are the most productive. So I'll give you 2 examples. If you get no pump at all, from like normal sets of 5 to 30 reps, man, you probably just didn't do enough, okay? The chances that doing more volume will benefit you is pretty fucking high. On the other hand, if you get a psychotic, earth-shattering pump, you can barely fucking move, the chances that you're not doing enough volume to grow are fucking damn near 0. So at least on those extremes, the pump is super, super informative and can be used really well. Next time, we'll take a look at how muscle disruption can also be used to inform whether we need to stay at the same volume next week, go up, or go down, and I'll see you then. Enjoy your pump.